Alright, we are back with a new video, and today we are once again updating the Amazing Race 34 Power Rankings following episode 3, which is the first part of a Mega Leg, which I find pretty funny considering how a big part of the promotion for this season was the fact that there would be no non-elimination legs, and yet here we are having Mega Legs that, at least from a viewer's perspective, are essentially the same as a non-elimination leg. But these also make these power rankings a little complicated as we are still in the middle of a leg and we don't have much of an equalizer that could allow certain teams to catch up. So because of that, this week's rankings are going to be a bit more influenced by what we're seeing on this particular leg right now, as even though there are no teams that have been eliminated, there are certainly teams that I feel like could do better if they somehow survive this leg, but given their current position, they're not in the best spot, so I have to base it off that. But there are 10 teams to rank here, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the ranking. So starting off at number 10, the team that I believe is the least likely to win the race right now is Rich and Dom. Now this shouldn't come as too big of a surprise given how mediocrely they've done so far on the race, and while they don't seem like the worst team in the world, they've consistently been in the back of the pack and they're just not good enough to really transcend like the fact that they have been so far behind for a lot of it. And this leg is no different, where they're currently in second to last. And yes, while they haven't collapsed to the same degree as certain other teams that we'll be talking about soon, I still feel like they're going to be in a pretty tough spot going into the second half of the mega leg. And I wouldn't be surprised if Glenda and Lumumba end up passing them to where they end up being eliminated by the end of the leg. And even outside of that, the fact that we have now seen them across 3 episodes consistently being in the back of the pack and not really doing anything to really get in front really makes me worry about their long-term prospects. And because of that, I do have them here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and this is an example of how the Mega Leg is impacting this particular power ranking, as this is a team that I have been ranking relatively high so far, but given their current spot on this leg, I am a bit worried for them. But here we have Glenda and Lumumba here, and really their placement here is because of where they are on the leg right now, where they really had a big collapse here, going from second place all the way to the back of the pack. And at this current spot, they are in last place heading into the second part of the mega leg. Now, I will admit that they have a lot of potential to catch up, as they didn't seem to do that poorly on the tasks themselves. It was more so the fact that they struggled getting to the detour in the first place, and by the time they got around to it, they were already so far behind. So that alone is a pretty big concern for them. Now, I will admit that if they do end up surviving the mega leg, they have a lot of potential to catch up and survive moving forward, but it's just the fact that we are still technically in the middle of a leg, there doesn't seem to be too many equalizers right now that would allow them to catch up, and with them being in immediate danger of being eliminated, I can't have them higher than number 9 here. Now moving on to number 8, and we have another team whose placement on this ranking is directly impacted by their current spot on the Mega, but here we have Quinton and Mattie, and again, their spot here is impacted by the fact that they are currently in 8th place, and a lot of that was due to them struggling so hard on the roadblock, where for a lot of the leg, they seem to be doing relatively fine. They didn't have too much trouble with the detour, and obviously navigation was not as big of a concern for them, but it's really this roadblock that is really getting them stumped and causing them to just fall behind. And if I'm being honest, I probably have less faith in them long term than Glenda and Lumumba should they survive this leg. But obviously, given the fact that they are in the back of the pack right now, and the fact that they have struggled so much on this roadblock so far, I can't have them any higher than number 8 here, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up moving up if they were to somehow survive the leg. Now moving on to number 7, and this is a weird team to talk about as I've consistently had them ranked pretty low on these power rankings, but currently they actually are in a pretty solid spot. But here we have Aubrey and David, and to their credit, they are in 3rd place right now. Now granted, a lot of that was because of the roadblock, and it just so happened to be a task that they were really good at, with David being a helicopter mechanic, and through that he was able to breeze through the roadblock and bypass a number of teams. So I do have to give them some credit for that. But if we're looking at the rest of the race so far, they've really underperformed, where they obviously had a really bad first leg, and I wasn't too impressed by their second leg. And even on this leg, before the roadblock, they were largely where they had been before, hovering around the 7th place spot. And it's really only through their performance on this roadblock that has allowed them to leapfrog all these teams and get to the front of the pack. But obviously, considering that this roadblock seemed particularly suited for their skill set, I'm not too sure how they're going to do moving forward on other tasks. And I wouldn't be surprised if, based on their previous track record, that they do end up falling behind as they get more tasks. So while they are currently doing all right on this leg, I can't have them higher than number 7 here, simply due to what we've seen from them before. Now moving on to number 6, and we have a team that I've been kind of high on before, but they have been having a pretty rocky leg so far. But here we have Abby and Will here, and obviously they are having a pretty bumpy leg, particularly on the tasks where they haven't been doing too poorly at navigation. They actually were able to leapfrog a couple teams simply due to their navigation ability. It's just when they get to the actual task that they really fall behind. They obviously get to the detour, they choose the medical one, and they obviously bomb that, which causes them to fall behind. And then even on the roadblock, they're obviously struggling as well. So obviously through that, we see them falling behind, where they went from 6th place at the beginning of the leg to up to 4th place at the start of the detour, and then now they're currently sitting at 7th place, so not a great spot for them. Now, I do feel like they will survive the leg, so I'm not going to factor in their immediate performance as much here, and I feel like they are probably going to be in it for a decent amount of time. But obviously they haven't had the best showing so far, so I can't have them higher than number 6 here. Now moving on to number 5, and we have a team that is pretty much the opposite of Abby and Will right now. But here we have Emily and Molly, and they've been doing pretty well so far, where they literally have gotten to the top of the pack simply due to their challenge performance. Where they get to the detour, they do the medical one, and they're able to breeze through it, getting all the way up to 5th place just to that. And at the roadblock, it's a similar story where they were able to get all the way to 2nd place simply due to how well they're doing at the roadblock, while all the other teams are struggling to a degree. So I do feel like they are doing pretty well on this leg, and given their story, I feel like they are being set up for a deep run here. But with that said, I feel like based solely off their race performance so far, I can't have them too much higher as they've largely been in the middle of the pack so far. And yes, while they have been doing well at this particular leg, like you can attribute some of that to the fact that the tasks appeal to their specific skill set. So, I mean, whether that translates to future legs will remain to be seen. But for now, given everything that we know, I did decide to put him here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and I feel like this is a team that has continually been getting better over the course of the race, and now they seem to be in a pretty good spot. But here we have Luis and Michelle, and they obviously got out to a pretty rocky start where they barely got by in the first leg, getting a 10th place finish. 2nd place finish was a significant improvement, and I noted that at the time, where they went from 10th place all the way to 5th place by the end of the leg, getting that finish. And now here they seem to be following that up, where yes, they did have some trouble getting to the roadblock after the detour, but for the most part, they've been doing pretty well. And now they're sitting at 4th place heading into the second part of the mega leg. So I feel like that alone indicates that they have been getting more comfortable with each other over the course of the race, and that in turn has led to an improved performance. So I feel like moving forward, Luis and Michelle could be a force to be reckoned with moving into these future legs. But considering the fact that they haven't won a leg, considering the fact that they haven't even gotten into the top 3 at the end of an episode yet, I did decide to leave them here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I know some people will feel like this team is a bit too high, particularly given their performance so far on the mega leg, but I still feel like this team will do pretty well moving forward. But here we have Linton and Sharik, and we obviously need to go to the detour where they really struggled a lot, dropping from 3rd place all the way down to 8th place, and obviously that's not great. But they do make a pretty solid bounce back once they get to the roadblock, where they are able to salvage a 5th place finish there, and now they seem to be back in the swing of things heading into the second part of the mega leg. But even before that, while this is statistically their worst leg so far, they have been a relatively solid team so far, and through that, I can't fault them as much as I would with other teams. And I feel like through that, Linton and Sharik will probably continue to be a solid team moving forward. But obviously, with their not so great performance on the detour, and also the fact that I feel like other teams will probably do better than them moving forward, I did decide to leave them here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and it's the same top 2 as I had last week, and it's actually the same order as well. But at number 2, we do have Derek and Claire, and this has not been the best leg for them either, particularly with the roadblock, where they actually did okay at the detour, where they were able to breeze through that all right and get all the way up to second place by the start of the roadblock. But then, similar to some other teams we talked about earlier, they did struggle quite a bit, dropping all the way to 6th place. And obviously, that's not great. Now, if we compound that with how they did at the roadblock last week, that wasn't great either. So I feel like we are starting to see more of their flaws over time, and that there are simply some tasks that they will not do very well in. And I feel like that could come back to bite them later on in the race. But I still have this confidence in them that they could do well moving forward. I mean, we have seen them win a leg. We have seen them do pretty well. We have seen them do pretty well bouncing back from adversity so far. And I feel like that alone is enough to have them in serious contention. I do have faith in Derek and Claire to do well in the race. And yes, while they have struggled in some tasks here and there, it hasn't been enough to where they can't recover. So because of that, I do have them at least this high on the list. But given their rockiness, I can't have them at the number 1 spot. So because of that, they are here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the team that I believe is the most likely to win the Amazing Race 34 right now is Marcus and Michael. And I think their performance speaks for itself, where despite so many teams having these really big shifts over the course of the leg here, with teams like Glenda and Lumumba having these big collapses, Derek and Claire also had a big collapse. Quinton and Mattie also had a collapse. The fact that Marcus and Michael came into the leg with the lead and were able to hold it the entire time in the episode is something to be commended. Now, obviously, it's unlikely that they'll be able to hold it entirely, as I do feel like other teams could catch up to them. But I feel like based on the evidence that we have so far, they have been able to remain solid. They have been able to breeze through these tasks that other teams have struggled quite a bit on without too much difficulty. And obviously, going back to their previous legs, they have been a team that was able to find their footing not too long after the start of the race. And through that, they have been able to remain top contenders throughout a lot of the race. So I feel like adding that all in, I feel like they kind of had to be number 1 after this leg. And yes, while they could stumble moving forward, I feel like based on the evidence that we have right now, I do have them here at number 1. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, it really helps out with the channel. Now obviously I'll be back again next week to update the Amazing Race Power Rankings again, so stay tuned for that. I am also covering Survivor 43 as that is airing, so I'll be updating Power Rankings for that as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server. I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that's the video. See ya.